Hello and welcome to Astrology and Magic. My name is Valkyria Verdeur. I am your host. And for those of you who have been following along, I said I was going to do an episode on Mercury retrograde. However, I'm personally sick and tired of talking about Mercury retrograde. And so I know that if I made an episode about that, we would just sit in the tiredness of that. And I don't want to offer that to you. So instead, because we are in the middle of eclipse season, beautiful, gorgeous, love that for us, I'm going to be talking about moon cycles and moon magic today because I have been in my personal sessions with people talking about moon cycles and moon magic so frequently recently. I feel like I have explained what I'm about to explain to you in several different sessions recently. I feel like it's important information. If it's coming through so frequently, then I feel like probably everybody needs to know about it. So we're going to talk about it. However, before we get into the episode today, I do want to give some updates because there's actually some new offerings that I have. There's been some changes. Obviously, it's eclipse season. Things are changing. We're rearranging. So the first thing that I'm very, very excited to announce, I'm so very excited to announce this, is that I am starting to hold ceremonies at the start of every sun season. Our next sun season is the Taurus season. Now, if you are interested in this, it is a $25 entrance. It will be held on YouTube, a private live stream. There is more information available at astrologyandmagic.com. It's magic with a CK at the end. And if you are interested, I'll put a link in the description. We are going to do educational work at the beginning of the live stream, and then from there, I'll make sure that everyone has questions answered and that we have a pretty good general understanding of the information that's being presented, similar to how I present information here on the podcast and similar to how I present information in my long form videos on YouTube with my courses. It will be similar to that in the education portion. There's also going to be space held for reflection and direction of your sun cycle in this space also. And then we will be going through ceremony together. So I'll be calling in the spirits. I'll be making sure that they're fed, giving offerings. And while that is happening, if you wanted to give offering to the spirits at that time, that could be, if you feel the need to, appropriate in that activation for sure. If not, and you're there, that's not a part of your practice specifically, you're there to sit and receive, then that would be the time for sitting and receiving. Receiving looks different for everyone. So maybe you're just sitting and receiving the ceremony itself, and being a part of that order of what's coming through for us and being a part of that activation for the sun season. It could be that there's messages that come through for you while you're sitting and receiving. If you wanted to sit and do divination during that part, it's really up to you. However, it will be the portion where we're sitting in ceremony. I'll be sitting and calling on the spirits, and I'm very, very excited to offer that in a collective space. I've done it in personal spaces and I've done it in different regards, but I haven't ever offered it on a live stream or in the specificity, like with a very, very specific order of doing it for a sun season activation. And it's something I'm very much looking forward to. So I don't want to talk too much about it. And we have like a whole episode to get through, so there's that. But if you do want to join me, I will gladly receive you. I'm super excited. I'm super excited about it. So that is the first update. The second update is that I had someone reply to my episode, one of my previous episodes here on Spotify. So if you're listening on Spotify, thank you for that reply. And I saw them actually on my TikTok live stream and we talked about it for a moment. And they asked if there was any way to receive the information that I'm giving through my podcast visually. So if you are interested in that information, I am going to start adding my shorthand notes, kind of like the outline of my episodes that I create for myself. I'm going to start adding those to my blog email podcast update that gets sent out for people through the blog. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up for the blog again at astrologyandmagic.com. There's going to be other updates soon. Again, things are changing, rearranging. That's what it is. Sessions, offerings, my book of spells, the courses that I offer on YouTube, all the links, everything else that you would need are over at astrologyandmagic.com. So again, links will be in the description. And now let's jump into Moon Magic because we're in eclipse season. And honestly, I really hope that your eclipse season has been something that's been so beautiful for you. It's been very, I feel like, on a personal level, it's been very intense. I know that there's a lot of other people going through very intense changes. It may not be something that's intense, it feels like a different kind of intense, especially if you've been sitting in the work. And that's something I've said in previous episodes too. Like, people who have really been sitting in the work and allowing themselves to do what they need to do, we are going through a very, very big transition right now. So if you are going through that big transition, I send my love to you because it has been a big transition. It is what it is. So we're here to talk about moon cycles and moon magic. I'm going to start this episode on the education side of things. We're going to talk about the moon cycle itself and what working with the moon cycle itself can look like. Personally, for me, I know there's some people that make moon water and they do their moon water thing or anything else that you have, like other practices specifically. Personally, for me, on every single new moon, full moon, sometimes the quarter moons too, it just depends on how I'm feeling and what I'm doing. I will sit and write out what's going on in my life, if there's directions that I'm going. And so I'll kind of explain that as I go through also and how I work with that practice. That's something that I really need because I'm also going to be talking about how to work with the moon cycles on a yearly cycle. And I know for myself, there's a lot that happens in life. 6 months from now, a year from now, I'm probably not going to remember exactly what I'm thinking in this moment. So if I write it down, I'll remember. And so that's part of the reason that I write down the information. Again, I'll get onto that later. I am going to talk about kind of the reflection of the moon cycle with the menstruation cycle and practices thereof, and also some safety, not concerns, but just like safety regards and how to practice that. That is a very, very powerful, potent kind of magic. And with very, very potent, powerful magic, there's things like if something were to go not right or not good, because it is potent and powerful, it would be a powerful and potent not good. So I am going to talk about safety in that also, just a heads up on that one. And then I am also going to bring in too, because we are in the eclipse season. Thank you, eclipses. I am going to talk about with the eclipses kind of how the yearly cycle works with the eclipse cycle and what that looks like. Probably a little bit shorter note on that. So let's start it off. The new moon. So the new moon is actually when we have the first sliver of light. It's when the first bit of light starts to come onto the moon. And so it is the new moon. It is the new cycle. It's the beginning. It's, yes, still very shadowed. So there may be some aspects of this new moon where if you are going through and writing things down, sometimes this happens for me where I'll write things down on the new moon, or sometimes I just sit and I receive the information. What am I going through? And I'm able to receive clarity when I get to the full moon. But sometimes when I'm in that new moon phase, I'll be going through things or writing things down, or I have goals or different things I want to work on, and I'm very actively kind of directing the cycle on the new moon too. And then I'll get to a quarter moon or a full moon, and I'll look back and be like, whoa, I didn't even realize. I had no idea, because the new moon is so shadowed. So that's part of the reason also that I write things down that happen during the moons, is just because there's so much, like, it's wild to see how much we really change through the moon cycles and how much our intentions change and our order changes, and like really what's revealed to us. Like, since I've started this practice years and years ago, the more in tune that I have become with it, the more I realize how flexible we are as human beings. It's a crazy, wild thing. So yeah, so the new moon, it's the beginning, it's the start of the cycle, it's the first kind of like bit of light that happens with the moon. The first quarter moon, this is when we receive our first understanding of what direction are we going in. So the new moon, again, pretty dark, pretty shadowed. The first quarter moon is when, again, it's like it's the half half how do I say, half light, half dark? Yes. Half light, half dark. And it is the first direction. Where are you going in the cycle? Input on your direction. There's clarity on your directions, because in between the new moon and the first quarter moon, that's the time to activate the direction that you want to go in, whether you're doing it actively or you're doing it in a way where it's just kind of naturally happening. And sometimes it can be a mixture. It depends, for me personally, on what moon cycle we are in, because that's one thing I forgot to mention in the new moon, is that the new moon rules over the cycle of that moon. So from the new moon to the first quarter moon to the full moon to the third quarter moon, all the way to the balsamic moon, that first new moon rules over that entire cycle until we get to the next new moon. So the fact that that new moon rules over that entire cycle, it changes for me on a personal level, and probably if you pay attention to it, it'll change for you as well. The cycle changes depending on what the moon is in and kind of the energy of things. So between the new moon and that first quarter moon, working on really like activating, where do you want to go? What is it that you want to do? Sometimes, again, this is very just like sitting and receiving, more of a passive, just doing what feels natural. And sometimes there is more of an active energy in it. And so if you're paying attention to where the moon is in your chart, this is kind of a side note. If you're paying attention to where the moon is in your chart and how it's moving through your chart, and if you're getting to know your placements really, really well, you'll know that, say that there is a moon that's happening in Pisces. If you know what your placements are in Pisces and what house is ruled by Pisces for you, you're going to know what that moon does for you. That's in Pisces. It could be a full moon in Pisces. It could be a first quarter moon in Pisces. But that moon, depending on the phase that it's in, is going to be affecting those placements differently. And so that's why I said it earlier, I'm going to say it again. When I started this practice of starting to pay attention to how the moons were really affecting me, I started to realize how flexible we really are, like how adaptive we become, how much change we go through that we don't even really realize unless you put your eyes on it and you start to pay attention to it. So the first quarter is the first part of the direction. Where are you really going in the cycle? It's a good time to reflect of where are you really going? What have you done? And is there any clarity that's come through on what you've done so far? Question mark, because that's a great time for that first moment of reflection. Then when you get to the full moon, obviously, I hope this is obvious about illumination. The full moon is the moon of illumination. There's some people, I remember it was trending like a year ago or a couple of years ago, where people were really working with the full moons for release and removal, but the full moon is not necessarily always about release and removal. Sometimes it is more about receiving, to be honest. Sometimes it's more about receiving information and receiving the clarity. A lot of the times that's what I personally sit with the full moon for. There's so much light on that night. There's so much light and it's so bright where things usually are so dark. And so allowing yourself to sit and receive, for me at least, sitting and receiving that clarity and that illumination, and allowing yourself to realize, oh, this is really what I'm working with this manifestation. This is really what I'm asking myself to receive. This is really what I'm asking myself to understand and to learn. And there could be two really big clarities that come through on your emotions, as the moon is our emotional ruler. So understanding really what's happening with those emotions and understanding what's happening with it's a beautiful thing. It really, really is. It's a beautiful thing. There's so much clarity. I even put in my notes clarity in all capital letters after I wrote clarity just like normally. There's so much clarity that happens on the full moon. So I'm going to get in more to the yearly cycles in a moment after we go through the shorter, just one moon cycle at a time. But I do want to sit for a moment and talk about this full moon. So when the full moon happens, if you're looking to, say there's a full moon in Sagittarius, okay, in a couple months from now, we're going to have a full moon in Sagittarius. If you return to the new moon in Sagittarius that happened during Sagittarius season, then what you were working with on that new moon from Sagittarius season is going to be revealed when you're in that full moon in Sagittarius. So it really, that's more long-term. Again, we're going to get more into long-term in a moment. And also, when that full moon comes through, Thank you, Spirit. When that full moon comes through, allow yourself to really sit and reflect on anything that is coming to you directly, because the sun is about being direct. It's about our heart and having our heart be direct. The sun is about the fifth house. It's also about the Leo placements, and Leo is the modern ruler of the fifth house. That's why that connection is a part of that. It is about the heart. It's about our love, Love, capital L. Love. Not necessarily when it comes to having the intimate mirrors with partnerships, that's more about the seventh house. And then we have the art of exchange, that's more about the eighth house. But when it comes to just sitting in your joy and sitting in your love and really understanding those things, that's about the sun. That's about the sun. It's about the Leo placements of the fifth house. So that's when the sun is most directly on the moon, which is about our emotions, not just our love. Not just our love, not just our heart space, but our emotions. Because there's a difference between this is a different side tangent. This is not in the shorthand notes, but you know what? I feel like we need to talk about it, because the heart space really is the heart with that Leo energy and that heart space. Like, we focus so much on the joy and the love and like producing that joy and that love and having it be directed to different spaces and allowing ourselves to receive it from ourselves and from other people. But then when it comes to the moon placements and the Cancer placements, and that's going to be more about the fourth house. Cancer modernly rules the fourth house, and then the moon rules Cancer, so that's their connection there. It's more about our home, and it's more about, too, if you're looking at our emotions, it's not just about love. It's not just about joy. There's so many other emotions that we really go through. There's so many different emotions that we sit in, that we go through, and we also sit with those emotions differently in our body, in our space, in our environment, in the energy that we're sitting in our mind and how we're thinking about it. There's so many different emotions and ways that we're able to process emotions, whereas the sun specifically is really about our joy and like being direct in those things. So if you're looking at that combination of those for the full moon, it is about our reflections, that joy and that love, that heart space being very direct with our moon, and the moon being all the other emotions, including joy and love, all the emotions that we're able to have the capacity to sit with and understand. So what is that heart space being directly reflected to you through your emotions? That's really what the full moon offers to us. So that's the full moon. Again, possible removals. It's true that the full moon can show you really things that might need to be removed if that's a part of the clarity with the cycles that you're in. It's not for me on a personal level. I don't experience removal and release on every single full moon. However, having the clarity come through, we do have the removal of innocence in some regard, or the removal of confusion. So I suppose it does have to do with removal. Not always in the physical, though. Does it have to do with removal? Sometimes it is more of like a philosophical removal. Depends again on how you're working with the cycle for yourself. So that is also a very important factor of you being in the activity of the awareness and different activations when it comes to your cycle and how you're being in that cycle. So moving into the third quarter moon, from the full moon to the darkest moons, and we're like ending the cycle, we're more focused on removal. So we have this possible clarity of what needs to be removed happening on the full moon, but really that process starts to take place from the full moon into the darkness. And so the third quarter moon is really our signification of what direction are we going in to have the removal be solidified, consecrated, be done, have it be unspun, and also allow yourself to have victory in those things as you near the end. It could be letting go of different conversations or different mindsets or different emotions, or letting go of physical things or relationships, or not allowing yourself to entertain different spaces or organizations anymore. Again, very dependent on how you're working with the cycle and what that looks like for you. And removal, having that kind of signification. Both of the quarter moons, if you've noticed, the first quarter moon is really about what direction are you headed into, and having the clarity on the direction going towards something. And then you have the third quarter moon being the direction on what is being left while you're continuing to move forward. What are you leaving behind? And not allowing yourself to be blind to those things, even though you're walking into more darkness and there's the possibility of being more blind to things. If anything that you found that could be possibly blinding in an unhealthy way, which is a lot to say, if there's anything that's possibly blinding in an unhealthy way, that is where the third quarter moon is like, maybe it's this, maybe this is what needs to maybe that's what needs to be let go of here. And so that is our clarity on direction in our transition, because really from the third quarter moon into the next new moon, it really is, that's when we start our moment of transition out of the old cycle, or that current cycle into the new cycle. Because then from the third quarter moon to the next new moon, there is a moon, and I didn't know this. I did not know this until I started to study astrology. There is a moon that is called the balsamic moon. Now, if you're returning to the previous new moon, so like the new moon that rules over that entire moon cycle, all right, stay with me, that new moon, say that it's we just had, for those of you who are listening, like right after this comes out, we just had our new moon in Pisces. That was the new moon that ruled over, is still ruling over, I'm recording it in this moon cycle, ruling over our full moon in Libra eclipse that happened on March 25th. So that new moon in Pisces will have a balsamic moon right at the very end of this cycle that is also in Pisces. And that is when things come to ground. That's when the whole cycle comes around. That's when we're done. That's when we're finished with it. We've spun what we've needed to. We've unspun what we've needed to. And that is where, well, if you're actively taking, part in the cycle, what you've needed to do, what you've wanted to do, and because again, it does take your active participation. That's kind of like one of the really big things about this, is that even if it's just the active participation of awareness, there does need to be active participation for you to really have the understanding of what it is that you're receiving from the moon magic and the moon cycles, because cycle magic is something that's very, very powerful. Cycle magic is very powerful. And yes, we're talking about moon cycles, but cycle magic in and of itself is, you could talk about generational cycles when it comes to ancestral magics. You could talk about your daily cycles from day to night to day to day to night. That's a cycle also. Any different routines that you keep in your life, that's also cycle magic. Our yearly cycles, that's cycle magic. There's so many different cycles. Cycle magic is a broader term. Also, we're learning about moon cycle magic, so that is what it is. So even if you wanted to go and study different types of cycle magic, if that's something that interests you, very powerful, especially if you're working with the moon cycles. And that I feel like if that's like an elective independent study, if you wanted to pick it up, because it could be something that actually is very beneficial, especially if you're either new to this practice or you just want to study it more. Look at already what you're doing in your routines and in your cycles that you're working with, and then see kind of how the moon cycles start to reflect on that. Is there anything you're learning from the moon cycles and your moon magic with those cycles that actually is influencing other cycles in your life? Because the moon is a very powerful being. It is what it is. And also vice versa. Like, are there other cycles in your life that are influencing the moon cycles or are a part of the moon cycle somehow? So that's a really powerful, it's a very powerful reflection tool. It's also a very powerful way to integrate your weavings with the moon magic into your daily structure and into your day-to-day life. So I definitely would recommend that if you would like to pick it up, if you feel like you need to. You got goosebumps, however you're feeling over there. If not, no worries. It, again, elective kind of extra thing. But anyways, moving into the balsamic moon again. So the balsamic moon, again, new moon rules, and then that sign is where the balsamic moon will be before we move into the next cycle. That's when things come to ground. It's the darkest moon in the sky. Then this is what I was saying earlier. I didn't know this until I started studying astrology. I thought that the new moon, I was very incorrect. I thought that the new moon was the darkest moon in the sky. But it's not. It's the balsamic moon. That's when everything is dark. That's when it's the darkest, is the balsamic moon. The new moon is where we have our first light come through. The balsamic moon is considered a time of rest. It's like rest, digest, really allow the cycle to end, call it through, be done. It is that true? Do I want to call that through? It's the death moon. Love you, death. That's true. It's the death moon. That's where the if you're working with your cycles and there is not a pregnancy that happens, then yeah, there is a removal. It is a death moon. Love you, death. That's true. So in that, there is kind of this like things need to end, things need to not be done, or things need to be done, not be done, depending on, how that works for you. And it is really a time of rest and recovery too for people, especially if you're someone who starts to notice your integrations with your weavings and different things like that. It is a time of rest and receiving. And then it starts over. And then we have the new moon. And then we go through the whole thing over again. Different moons rule the next moon cycle. So it makes it different. And also, there we go. We're doing it again. So if you're someone, so now let's talk about practices with the cycle, with your menstruation cycle. If this is something that you take a part of in your life, and want to participate in, especially if you wanted to reflect it upon the moon cycle and where you're at within your moon cycle or your womb cycle, and what's happening also up with the moon, powerful reflections for that. That is, I feel like, also another independent study. I'm not going to go over it today, I guess is what I should say, even if you don't want to sit and study it. But regardless, the balsamic moon, for some people, the new moon is when the cycle of the womb comes to ground. For some people, it's the balsamic moon is when it comes to ground. Personally, the way that I work with this, I'm not going to share a lot of secrets about it, but I will share this. The balsamic moon is when it starts, your menstruation part of your cycle. That's when it starts, is the balsamic moon, when you're resting and you're recovering and you're realizing there's an end. This has ended. We're done. And it's through. And then you get about halfway through menstruation, and maybe this is a common experience. This is part of my personal experience. I've also heard from other people that this is a part of their experience. So if it's not, then reflect upon the different types of moon energy for yourself and kind of see how it works for you. Powerful, very true. What happens is that through the balsamic moon, when that new moon begins, you're still in that powerful portal. It's a portal. That menstruation is a portal. It's when your portal comes to ground, comes to the earth, comes to land, comes to the ground. It's no longer internal. It is external, meaning that there is that portal open. Beautiful, very potent, powerful, grand, gorgeous. It's a beautiful time. So when it comes to that balsamic moon, again, the ending, and then the new moon coming into the beginning, having those kind of woven together and understanding that cycles are going to continue. It's a death and a rebirth process as you're going through the ending of one moon cycle into the next moon cycle. It's the death and rebirth of different weavings, of different cycles, of different leavings. And you'll probably also, if you do this over a long term, start to notice how the cycles are starting to weave together. And what does that look like for you? And what does that mean for you? So there is the reflection of how to work with your body, if that's something that you're working with in that cycle. If not, then no worries about it. Maybe there's someone who needs the information that you're able to share it with. And if not, then you know what? Thanks for listening anyways. I do want to talk about safety when it comes to this kind of magic. This is magic that is not easily undone. It is very powerful. I've said that multiple times, but I kind of want to reiterate how serious it is. It is very, very powerful. It is a very powerful being. It's a very powerful experience. It's something that can be very empowering to empower yourself through that practice. And for people who are not as experienced with moon magic, with menstruation cycle magic, if you don't have the experience yet, be very sure, very specific before you do any sort of weaving. That's not to scare you out of the practice, because sometimes we have to learn through experience. One of the things that I have learned through this form of magic is that if you weave something with your cycle of your body and you realize you don't want it there anymore, then you're the one who has to figure out how to close that door. So, understand that in the process, wisdom comes at a price. Most of the time, we have to sacrifice our innocence. Love you, innocence. And also, it's true. So, if you're not sure, if you have a bad feeling, if you're uncertain about something, just really be truthful and honest with yourself. Check in with yourself. And if you practice wisely, nothing comes surprisingly. So practice wisely. You can do it. And also, it is very powerful, which means that there's a lot of really beautiful, powerful things that can become because of that cycle. So, even though I've stated the very serious side of it, there's also a lot of really beautiful things that can come out of it if that is a practice that you either do practice now or would like to begin practicing or are interested in. Magic, something that the spirits in my practice would like to remind me of, is that magic is kind of inherently a dangerous thing. It's kind of inherently a dangerous, it is. That's just what it is. So if you are willing to do the work, congratulations. You'll probably receive what you're asking for and learn a lot of lessons on the way. And if not, I'm not really sure. Because for me, I've always, even in my times of when I have stepped away from it, I have come back in and learned the lesson again. So if you weave something and you don't want to do the work to get out of it, you'll be in that cycle. And that's just what it is, because that's how magic is. So again, though, very beautiful thing. There's a lot of really great things that can come out of it. And if you're somebody who already practices that, well, shout out to you, because you know what? Good for you. It's a beautiful thing to sit with and to practice and to understand. And I definitely, too, one of the other kind of safety notes is keep it secret, keep it sacred. So if you would like to keep it sacred for yourself, keep it secret. Don't tell people about it. Just make it for you. It's your practice, So that's my other safety note. But that kind of goes with every single type of magic and every single type of practice. If you want it to be sacred, keep it secret. You want it to be secret, keep it sacred. They reflect upon each other in that regard. So, yes. Now, on to the yearly cycle. I kind of mentioned it earlier about having the new moon in one sign and then having the full moon 6 months later in the other sign. That's a very powerful thing also. The reason I do want to get into that is because we are in eclipse season. And what happens with eclipse season is that's what every 6 months or so, we have our eclipses that come through, right? So if there's a new moon, we had our new moon in Libra, October 14th of 2023, and we just had our full moon, March 25th. So we have this 6 month period, and the reason that the eclipses are more powerfully aligned is because with one of the reasons, not just totally, completely because, but one of the reasons because is with the lunar nodes. The cycle of the lunar nodes is that we have this so let's talk about like physical application as I explain also the process of how this happens. We had our lunar nodes change in July of 2023. We were still, though, under the influence of our most previous eclipse cycle, which was in Taurus and Scorpio. So even though we're under the influence of those eclipses in our 6-month cycle, we do have this transition start to happen in the super, 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 super dark indirect undercurrents. Then the October eclipses come through, and there we have the transitionary period start. In the transitionary period, we have one eclipse happen in one of the nodes from the new nodes, the new lunar nodes, and we have one eclipse happen from the previous lunar nodes, even though the new node is still happening. So with our most previous eclipses, that was with our new lunar nodes, with the lunar nodes we're in now, that changed in July, we had the Libra eclipse, and that's our south node. With the next moon, we had our full moon in Taurus. Now the Taurus north node was from our previous lunar eclipse, or from our previous eclipse cycles. So even though our north node was in Aries, at the time of that eclipse, the moon was still ruled by Taurus. So what happens is that we go through this next 6 months of this transitionary period where simultaneously we're calling in the new cycle, because the new moon is what happened with Libra. So we're calling in this new cycle. And at the same time, we're having these clarities, full moon, we're having these clarities around Taurus energy and what needs to be done, what needs to be removed, what do we need to wrap up, what are we learning about. And so now that we're going into this next season of being in fully, we had our full moon eclipse in Libra, and we're about to have our new moon solar eclipse in Aries. And with that new moon solar eclipse, now we're starting off it's a year. We have a whole entire year of being in this lunar node completely. Towards the end of that year, the lunar nodes will change. Again, we're still going to be under the influence of our of the eclipses that happened in the lunar nodes of Libra and Aries. And in the next year, so not in our next upcoming eclipse season, which is, I believe, September, October, around that time. And then, so not that one, but the one after that happens at the beginning of 2025, and I believe that one is also in March. That's where we begin, because the lunar nodes are going to be changed, so we start another transitionary season of 6 months, and then after that 6 months is done, then we go into our next eclipse, like being fully in that lunar node cycle. It's a beautiful process to undergo that kind of long-term weaving. And so we have these really big directions that happen on the eclipses, because we have our sun and our moon and our earth are completely in alignment. Being aligned. Being completely aligned, which means there's also complete light and complete dark. It's complete alignment. There is a beautiful, beautiful, powerful, with that alignment, integration that happens on those eclipse days and in those eclipse seasons. So while the new moon from 6 months ago, if you're looking at a moon that is not in the lunar nodes of the eclipses or is not being affected by the eclipses, then yes, you can still work with that long-term weaving. And I definitely, if this is a practice that you're going to sit in, definitely recommend that you do, because it's very, very powerful. And it will also allow you to get to know the cycles and how you sit in them and how you're weaving with them, because then it could be that 4 years from now you're realizing your patterns with what is happening with the lunar nodes then, and then you're able to actually sit with those lunar nodes in more of a self-educated way about who you are with those cycles, and that is also a gorgeous, beautiful thing. So when it comes to the eclipses, when you're weaving and working with, especially if you're planning on doing this with the new moon solar eclipse, and like integrating this information for the new moon solar eclipse on April 8th, good for you. You know what? Good for you, because we're starting off a lot of really new things. I did do another episode about that eclipse and the eclipse season specifically, but if you're working with this information or integrating these practices, there's a lot of really new things that are happening. Plus, Saturn being in Pisces, and us going through Pisces season, we were asked to pick up a lot of new practices. So, and we also have Venus with Pisces for the previous eclipse in Libra, and Mars will be in Pisces for the Aries eclipse. So we have a lot of transition, a lot of the Saturn influence is still there. Again, another episode on that fully and completely. But we do have this transitionary phase coming up for the next 6 months. There's a lot of new stuff happening. Plus, there's a lot of change happening. It's really big. It's really big. It's really, 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 really big thing that's going on. So, let me get back. What was I saying? We were talking about alignments. That's true. So going back to the alignments, the reason that it becomes such this like big, profound thing that happens with the eclipses is because not only are we in these big long-term weavings with the moon, but we're also experiencing the complete and total alignments of the earth, the sun, and the moon. Crazy. It's a wild thing, especially if we're returning to the information on the sun being that heart and the joy and what that is. And then we have the moon being our emotional body and like the emotional waves that we're going through in life and how we adapt in life with those and to those emotional waves. And then with the earth, it's like things are grounding. We are grounded. We are in the gravity, grounded on the earth. So that's the reason that it's such a really big thing that happens, is because you're taking this really big moment of the sun and this really big moment of the moon, and you're putting them together, and then you put the earth in the middle of that. You add the earth to that equation, and the earth that's where we are. And then we ground and we bring the gravity, we experience the gravity. We don't bring the gravity. I mean, even if things are gravitating around you, I suppose that's true. Maybe you do bring the gravity to what gravitates around you. You know what? Shout out to you for that. So we have that gravity, we have the grounding. So that's why it can feel on that's more of like a philosophical or theoretical level to it, but also physical application. Look at the alignments of the eclipses, and having that alignment of things grounding. Crazy. That's a crazy thing. So that's part of the reason on like a magical explanation or a theoretical kind of more philosophical level of explanation. Why the eclipses are such a big, why do they feel so big? Well, there you go. That's what's up with that. And also how to work with the other moon magic and the moon cycles if you so choose to, if you so would like to. So that's what that is. I appreciate you being here. That's what I have for you today. I appreciate you being here. If you are looking to become one of the listeners who supports the podcast, hop on over to the blog. I'll put it in a link in the description. It's also available on astrologyandmagic.com. You're able to sign up for monthly and yearly donations, or I can't remember exactly how the yearly is set up. I'm pretty sure that you can add kind of any price that you would like to for that one. And then I believe it's $5 a month is what my, how do I say? Offering is. Yeah. So if you'd like to become one of those listeners, then beautiful. Thank you. And thank you for the people who do support me there. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I give my love to you, and I give my love and my gratitude and my reverence to you for sitting here with me and receiving this information. I give my gratitude, love, and reverence to the highest spirit, and to the great mother spirit, and to the great father spirit. Ooh, and to the mothers and the fathers and the spirits and the ancestral spirits and the astrological spirits and the indigenous spirits where I am and where you are receiving this information now, in Love, Truth, Elevation, the highest benevolence, and the order of Love, Truth, Elevation, and the highest benevolence. I give my gratitude, love, and reverence to those spirits true. And may you receive what you need to through this eclipse season. Again, I give my gratitude, love, and reverence to you for being here. We are going through a lot of change in this season. I know for me personally, I've been reflecting upon myself and realizing, wow, I'm a completely different person. It is very strange. You know what? Change feels strange. It is a rearrange. So if you're moving and grooving, rearranging, feeling things, feeling good in yourself, good for you. If you're feeling a little rocky, a little shaky, allow that grounding to come through for you. Do what you need to do. You're going to make it through. And I give my love, gratitude, and reverence to you again. And if you end up going to the Taurus sun season activation ceremony, I'm very much looking forward to it. I just wanted to pop that back in at the end. I'm really looking forward to that. So if you are, yeah, I'm super ready for it. I'm super ready for it. So I'm grateful for every single one of you that does decide to come through for that. And that's it. I'll leave it there. Do what you need to do. I love you. Go and brew. I'll talk to you next time.